The CSS rules with which we've started are fun and easily understandable. But even with our modest start, we must, once again, take up the topic of accessibility. So in Lesson 2, we learned that using the correct tag with the best semantic meaning is very important for a variety of reasons, one of which included visitors who may have a disability. If you clearly put your page navigation in a nav block and use the header tags and others like article or main, then this can greatly enhance the page experience for certain disabled visitors, like the blind who might be having the page read aloud to them with a screen reader. Accessibility concerns are important for CSS usage as well, perhaps in double. So as page authors, if we don't use CSS, then the page visitor just sees the page with a default typography, and perhaps assisted by tools that can help zoom in on pages, make text bigger, invert colors for the light sensitive, and etc. But as we start to customize the look of the page with CSS, we may unintentionally thwart those tools or make the reading experience less comfortable for those with vision problem. So, there are guidelines for accessible typography, and there are really just a few things to avoid. First is that do not make text too small, and do not make lines of text too tight. Also, do not use foreground and background colors that are too close to one another. In other words, ensure that there is a good color contrast. And do not irregularly space text or make it jump around. So for properties, for the font size, misuse of font size might make text too small. So be aware of that. And furthermore, in the past, the gold standard practice was to use EM units instead of PX or pixel. So this is no longer as true as it was, but the practice of using EM or REM units is definitely to be encouraged, and it should be your default unit when working with text. For the line height, an overly small line height will cause lines to become cramped and difficult to read. So even the largest text can be rendered unreadable by a too small line height. So generally, your line height should always be at least 1.5 times the font size. So, for example, line height should be greater than 1.5 EM. So for the color, color contrast can be easily undone by misuse of the color property. So the exact rules for contrast are rather advanced. So for example, wide stroke text is allowed to have less contrast than narrow stroke text. But regardless of the rules, the overall concept is easy to understand. Keep your text high contrast to the background. So there are further color guidelines concerning certain combinations, like bright blue text on a bright red background. But the rule of the thumb is that if the text is at all hard for you to read, then just assume that it is unreadable to someone with a visual disability. So if you are interested, there are tools that can help, such as here, Tanaguru Contrast Finder. So there's a link provided for this. And for the text align property, any long passage of text should have its alignment match its reading order. So that means if the language is English, which is read from left to right, then any long passage of text should be aligned left. Right aligned or center aligned text can be very hard for dyslexics. And obviously, a header or perhaps a menu might be exempt because they are not typical long passages of text. So use this guideline. So this guideline doesn't mean an end to good page layout and typography. So now, we've seen how typography can affect the accessibility and applicability of your page. It is not very difficult, so common sense and awareness are good companions that will serve you well.